Hello and welcome to Bramall Lane. Reaction to Newcastle United 8, Sheffield United 0 here. I can't quite put into words what I've just seen, but the thing I can best sum it up with is really that it could have been a result for the ages. It could have been the result of the Premier League era. It could have been the first double figures victory for Newcastle, because they were utterly dominant in the first half, and I tweeted that it was only 3-0, and really they should have made more of that first half. Sheffield United, I can't remember a worse performance that I've just seen from a Premier League team. They started well. They missed a chance through Luke Thomas early on in the game at 0-0, which really proved pivotal, because just moments later Sean Longstaff made it 1-0 to Newcastle, and from then it was just utter domination. It was very, very difficult to really comprehend how Sheffield United could play that badly. They just lost all semblance of effort, semblance of energy, semblance of direction. Everything that could have gone wrong for them from the moment Sean Longstaff scored did, but Newcastle were clinical, particularly in the second half. That was the thing I mentioned when I tweeted, was that Newcastle just weren't. They were in third gear. They weren't really. They were probing a little bit. They did what they really needed to, but they could have done plenty more, as they showed in the second half. I think when they just cut through them like a hot knife through butter. There were reports that Paul Heckingbottom was under pressure after the Tottenham game, which they were unlucky to lose, as I said in my preview of this game. But they just didn't turn up as soon as the first goal went in. It was quite shocking to see just how their confidence levels dropped, how their energy levels dropped, how their levels of anything, the basics that you need to play any game of football, let alone in the Premier League, and let alone against a team that's just got a result in the Champions League this week. So I can't quite believe how bad Sheffield United were, and I do think they were bad more than Newcastle were utterly brilliant. I think they laid a lot on the plate for Newcastle, but Newcastle took their chances. That was the difference in the second half. As I say, they were incredibly clinical when as I say, if they'd started playing like that earlier in the game, we could be looking at a 10-0, 11-0, 12-0 game, and that isn't an exaggeration, and that's quite shocking really to consider at this level. I was impressed by Sheffield United against Manchester City for long swathes of that game. They were defensively compact. There was no space in between the middle of in between the lines in that game at all for Manchester City. They had to go on the outside, as you'll remember as you'll know from if you watch that video, how much I sort of lauded Man City's ability to react in that game, whereas Newcastle didn't have to react at all. They just probed and eventually found the goal, and then the floodgates just opened and didn't shut. I think from a Newcastle perspective, Bruno was back to his absolute best today. He was confident on the ball. Obviously we know he's just about to sign a new contract. He was confident on the ball. He was decisive. He was moving forward without the threat of anyone getting in behind, just exploiting all that space. But the thing about the space being exploited was it was exploited by both passes and runs. Sean Longstaff was I think a huge reason why Bruno, and I've written a piece for Colossus Bets on this from the game, a huge reason why Bruno has improved this week, and it's just this week really, since the pair of them have started playing together. In all three games, I think Sean Longstaff has been fantastic, and he's allowed Bruno to express himself in a way that he perhaps couldn't next to Tonali, and that's a thing that Eddie Howe needs to figure out. But I think Newcastle are a much better team, and that's not a surprise, but Newcastle are a much better team when Sean Longstaff's in it. Even though he may not be the most glamorous name on the team sheet, but you've got to remember as well, he was the one who scored the first goal. He got in, it was a fantastic finish, and that was after an injury to Harvey Barnes, which I'm sure we'll hear about later on when Eddie Howe speaks to the media. I might just catch that as I head in, but I've got to dash from a train. But Anthony Gordon came on and was just electric throughout the game. Just did not give Jayden Bogle a second to relax, and that was the difference. When Newcastle in the second half, they just were relentless. They just pounced on everything. They made everything count, which I sort of remarked that they weren't doing in the first half. Sheffield United, meanwhile, were just completely not of the races, and I just think that they kind of thought that the game could end, wanted the game to end at 21 minutes. I can't really explain what I've just seen from them and what that really could mean for their season now. I mean, to get turned over like that can have a lasting impact. As I say, if Paul Heckingbottom is indeed his job is under threat. Obviously, there's still 6 games into the season now, no victory, but there's a telling thing with the majority. Well, all 3 of the newly promoted teams are 3 of the 4 who we had to win alongside Bournemouth, and none of them have stepped up to the gulf of the Premier League yet. But particularly, I think, I expected a little bit more from Sheffield United at home after that game against Man City that I was at, and then the draw against Everton last time, which I missed. So this is a day that's all about Newcastle, and the fans had a great time in that away end, and they were singing their hearts out, and it was an unbelievable atmosphere. Sheffield United fans really gave the referee a tough afternoon. I didn't really think he deserved it. I think he got everything right, in my opinion. I didn't think there was anything particularly wrong. Newcastle should have had a penalty. Sorry, that's the one thing that he didn't get right in that first half. That could have set it into even more of a record territory. As it is, best away win Newcastle have ever had in the Premier League. Just an absolutely incredible game, an incredible performance, and I think it's a marker for Newcastle as well. That's the other thing. It's a real marker for them to, after a couple of abject performances and abject results against Man City, obviously Liverpool, and then Brighton, there was a lot of sort of worry about this season and worry about where Newcastle were going to go and what was going to happen this season. But the sensible thing and logical thing to think about those fixtures were they were difficult fixtures at a difficult time. Newcastle are finding their groove again, and I think that is absolutely to do with Sean Longstaff coming back into the team. Where Sandro Tonali has struggled, and Eddie Howe mentioned this in his news conference before the game, where Sandro Tonali has struggled is with adapting and not having the time on the training pitch, as we found out. But Sean Longstaff is a player that also needs a lot of time to perform at his best usually, but he's slotted in I think in the last week and just really helped Bruno Guimaraes to perform at his best. Bruno was majestic today, on the ball, made so many decisive little passes, but the flicks around the corner as well. Every single point that Newcastle had, they got through that midfield with ease, whether it was through Longstaff or through Bruno, through Miggy Almiron or through Anthony Gordon. Every one of them was just on absolute flames today, and that's just so positive for Newcastle going forward. They obviously have Manchester City in the Cup this week, and then Burnley at home, another of those teams, as I mentioned, who have struggled to adapt to the Premier League. So they should really fancy their chances of getting ahead of steam going into that PSG game in the Champions League on October the 4th. Thank you very much for joining me from Bramall Lane. One last spin and one last view of the pitch. I think the players are still out there, the substitutes are still warming down. Back for a preview of the Manchester City game on Tuesday. Please continue to like, share and subscribe for more of this kind of content if you like what you hear, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.